All right, guys. So I've had 3 days to experience some of what the 10.5 patch of Escape from Tarkov has to offer us, and I wanted to give you guys a bit of a synopsis on my first impressions on the good, the bad, and the ugly, as well as a few tips and observations I've had to save you guys maybe some time, some money, and some headaches. So let's go ahead and start with the good. So the first awesome change in 10.5 was the med and consumable animations that I did a previous video on a couple days ago. So far, they've seen rock solid from an implementation standpoint, and I've had no issues or bugs with any of the animations. They look and feel amazing. I have heard a few people that have gotten stuck in animations and can't exit them, but I haven't experienced anything like that before. I haven't had to really adjust my playstyle too much from this. I'm still able to play aggressively within engagements. I just need to be a little bit smarter about when and what to heal and at what times. Now, what I have learned in 10.5 is that bleeds are much more punishing than they used to be. So I find that I end up prioritizing fixing a bleed first and foremost, so that I avoid blacking out one of my limbs. Although these days with bone breakages being so common, which I'll get into a little bit later, if I find that I have a broken leg, a lot of times I'll prioritize splinting a broken leg before anything else so that I can be mobile again. I'd very much rather get away with a leg blacked out but alive than die trying to prevent it. Now, in my opinion, broken arms or broken hands or whatever aren't really worth fixing in the middle of a fight. Now, all that being said, I find I also need to take in a lot more meds with me than I used to. On a typical customs run, with the amount of action that I usually get into, I want to have at least 3 car med kits, painkillers, and splints. Those are definitely a must. There have been a few times where even that wasn't enough. I'm finally starting to break the habit of instantly spamming my heal hotkey, which I usually have set to 4 all the time. I did end up getting killed a few times because of that, but I'm now finally getting into a rhythm of when it's safe to heal. I still tend to heal on the go. I'm just find that I'm, making sure I'm more mindful of my surroundings and I'm ready to left or right click quickly if I need to cancel the med animation at any point. Now, the thing I notice the most with the new changes is mostly that people won't be walking around full health anymore for the most part, because when you heal, it only heals a single part of your body at a time. So it's much better to actually take 30 HP worth of damage to a single body part than it is to take 5 HP of damage to each limb. One requires a single heal in only a few seconds, whereas the other requires 5, and it's a few seconds times 5 for the same amount of HP to be regained. So that's kind of annoying. Now, as I said, I think most people will be walking around, at 80 to 90% of health these days rather than 100%. So that's just something to keep in mind, and would explain, I think, a lot why the time to kill seemed to be a little bit quicker than it used to be. Okay, so on to the next awesome change that came with 10.5, the flea market and its effect on quests and the economy. If any of you guys watch Pestily make it from level 1 to 40 in a single stream, he's a fucking Terminator. One of the most noteworthy things that you may have seen is how rich he was able to get simply by being the first to level up and acquire the level restricted items. This is actually something I'm not a huge fan of because it rewards people for grinding on the first few days of a patch, which is kind of an arbitrary thing to incentivize people to do, in my opinion. Those of us with full-time jobs or people who end up on vacation or, or working that day or whatever, feel such a massive loss of progress simply by not being in the game and playing for the first 10, 12 hours of the wipe. But as with most things in Tarkov, this is only a beta and things will be changing and evolving. So I guess we'll see where this goes from here and if this pattern, exists in future wipes or if, maybe Battlestate will make changes to this system. So with that being said, now with all these folks grinding out quests and farming early, those of us who don't otherwise have trouble financially benefit hugely from the massive increase in the supply of available items outside of raids. I've been massively overpaying for quest items, like graphic cards and flash drives and stuff like that. But at this point, my time is worth more than my money in the game. And the faster that I level with the new increased quest experience, the faster I'm able to get into the higher trader levels and then start to benefit from the lopsided economy myself. So I, end up making a lot of the money that I overpaid for in the beginning back pretty quickly. So in my opinion, it's worth to overpay right now. So with the new flea market system, I also see no reason to get into games with friends or people you met on forums or whatever to give them items anymore. If I have a friend that I want to give a Bitcoin to, rather than load into the raid, drop the item and hope it doesn't fall through the floor or that we don't get rushed and killed during the transfer, he can simply put up a trade offering some trash like a 10-round AK mag or a pile of bolts or a cheap common key, and have that up for the price of a Bitcoin and listed on the market. Now, all I need to do is search for that trade and to take it. Now, there's no way anyone's going to take that trade anyway, so it's simply just a sham trade to give your friend an item. It's kind of akin to, your uncle selling you that car for $1 just to make it quote unquote official. Now, just keep in mind that there is, a fee associated with listing things on the market. The cheapest I was able to see were like cheap, very common keys. One of the examples I was trying to show some folks on my chat the other day was essentially if you wanted to give a friend 300,000 rubles, if you put up a key like the 206 key for 300,000 rubles, the fee for the market ended up being around 10,000 rubles. So I still think that's a pretty decent fee to act as sort of an insurance policy against not having to risk taking your items into a raid with you. Now, the sorting and searching options that they implemented for the Rag Fair are fantastic. I think they did a really good job, and it's for sure a massive quality of life improvement. I find myself 99% of the time looking for a ruble sale for an item that I just want to see the cheapest few. So I hope in the future there's the ability to limit it to 3 or 5 or something like that, so I don't have to scroll through 3 pages of priority sales just to see the cheapest non-priority item. Now, one of the things one of my viewers pointed out to me today actually was that at the bottom left-hand corner, I believe, of the Ragfair menu, you are able to specify the size of the pages that you want for the items. So I would recommend increasing that to 100 if you kind of get annoyed having to go through 2, 3, 4, 5 pages just to get to the non-priority items to see what the cheapest item might be. So you can increase that up to 100. That ends up being, like I said, a much better way of browsing that menu. So give that a try if you have not already. And then the final note that I'm going to say about the economy is that, my undergrad macroeconomics schooling is telling me that as people progress through the quest line at kind of the normal pace, we're going to see prices of early game quest items go down and in the mid to late game quest items go up. Now, I anticipate a wave of price increases in the market for quest items, and then the rare items and valuable items like Fort and Bitcoin will likely come down and then level out a bit as supply increases, but the demand is going to ultimately stay static. So I'm guessing, like I said, it's going to level out for the most part. Now, I do expect to see a number of waves of trade and quest item price increases kind of flow through the economy as more players flock to the game in chunks, and progress through their quest lines at, a normal pace. But I expect the peaks of these waves to sort of attenuate over time, kind of like you picture ripples inside, a lake or a pond or a pool or whatever. That's kind of my prediction, but I guess we're going to have to see. That all depends on if there's people who are manipulating the economy in any way or people using macros or whatever. Like I said, we will see over time. Now, on a similar note, I am enjoying the pace of leveling that comes with the increased availability of rare quest items on the flea market, coupled with the increased quest XP after, the quest XP has been buffed. I think they did a good job with this so far, it seems. So I guess we'll see, how it goes over the next week or two of the patch. Now, one of the ideas that I had brainstormed and shared with Battlestate probably a month or two back was the option for players to be able to essentially skip a bunch of the steps in the process of starting a raid so that they could get in the queue faster, allowing solo players to skip half a dozen clicks just to get into the raid where most of those clicks were pointless for them. And I'd mentioned that this would benefit solo players as their time to get into a queue would be reduced. They wouldn't need to be subjected to a wall of racist names in the lobby when they weren't trying to find random people to queue with anyway. And then a tangential benefit was that it would eliminate any queue sniping that may or may not have occurred. Yeah, so I'm not really sure if they had this planned or if anybody there had actually listened to my advice, but they ended up adding a ready button on most of the menus, allowing you to get right into the queue much faster. So kudos to BSG for, a nice small quality of life improvement to the menu system. So on to hit reg. It seems to be pretty spot on and crispy. I'm really liking it so far. Although caveat emptor, it sort of did at the beginning of 0.10 as well, and that seemed to degrade over time. So I'm going to be keeping an eye on that for the future, and hopefully it stays as good as it is now. And then finally, onto something that has both some great elements and some horrible elements: scabs. I'll get into some of the bad later, but on the plus side, their movement and behavior, in my opinion, is awesome. I find them running towards or away from me or other players so much more often, which is more realistic, immersive, and makes kind of the previously very predictable, factory and customs runs much more dynamic and interesting. So I'm looking forward to some more tweaks to this in the future and some of the crazy experiences and encounters that we're going to have with scabs coming up. All right, so moving on to some of the not so good. It looks like they moved the trade that was matches for compacts that used to be level 1 Ragman. Looks like they moved it up to level 2, which in my opinion really sucks. This is one of my favorite early game trades that I was really looking forward to, utilizing this wipe. So I'm kind of hoping that they move that back, but I guess we'll see. When they also changed the binding of the shift and control for hold, breath, and sprint, it kind of fucked up a few of my keybinds, so I had to reconfigure a bunch of things to sort of get it back to normal. It's annoying that you can't bind them both to continuous on shift like I used to have, but the closest I was able to get was to set one to continuous and one to on press. But I honestly find myself holding breath, less now because of this. I'm going to have to try a few more things in practice to see where this ends up. Now, on the topic of performance, I haven't seen any major improvements to frame rate or stutter so far with 10.5. It's not a major negative, just not really a noteworthy improvement. I do see the same sort of stutter when you aim down sights as we saw before, but it isn't quite as drastic as it is. I'm not sure if, how true this sort of anecdotal experience is. But I guess we'll just have to see, over time if this improves or starts to feel better or worse. Now, one of the more annoying things for OCD people like me is all the goddamn badges and notifications all over the menus. And I want to be able to clear all the notification badges from the handbook, with one click, or be able to turn them off completely. I don't want to constantly go into those menus just to get rid of a notification bubble. Related to this, needing to examine all of the items in the traders always seems sort of silly to me, and I wish they'd just get rid of it. Everything available to you with traders should just be immediately examined. I see no practical reason that I can think of as to why this is something that we shouldn't, just do away with. I don't know why we constantly have to do this, but, maybe they have their reasonings. I'm not sure. So it appears as though there's still issues with point of aim, lasers, and optics. With certain optics and guns, especially the SMGs, I've noticed, even semi-fire tap shooting at close range, they seem to be shooting high on the dot compared to where the laser's shooting. I've shot right over the top of scabs' heads before when normally I'd be able to hit these easy shots. So this is just an initial anecdotal observation. I can't really say anything objective now without further testing. But I guess like I said, it's another thing I'm going to have to keep my eye on. All right, so now on to the ugly. I'm just going to go ahead and say that scavs are not okay. Before they were like Robocops, and then they got nerfed into the ground and only turned on Terminator mode like 15% of the time. But now they're back to like 100% Robocop mode again. And then coupled with their aggression that I mentioned earlier, they're just far too unrealistic in my opinion. They tank so many bullets, their vision is way too good, their aim is way too good, and then their grenade accuracy is unreal. Now, I've only encountered the scav boss a few times. The first time I was instantly murdered without even seeing them at all, just one tapped in the face. But I'm okay with scav boss being super OP, but the normal scavs should not be as accurate as they are with the vision and hearing that they have. It's already too high. It's so much better than humans. The parameters that they have tied to those sliders need to be toned down a little bit, in my opinion. So related to this, bone breakages are crazy right now, as most of you guys probably know. It seems like more than 60, 70, 80% of the time I get shot, especially by a scav, pretty much arm is instantly broken and blacked out after a single shot. Maybe that's realistic. I don't know. I've never been shot, but coupled with scavs never missing these days, it's just super punishing right now. And that's even with armor and helmets. On my first day of playing, 80% of my deaths were one taps from scavs instantly. Now, I don't really mind the increase in damage and breakages and bleeds, if I'm being honest, but when scavs are as accurate as they are right now, it just seems over the top. Now, another thing I think they need to tweak is blunt damage. I've had a few times where scavs or players with higher level helmets have tanked loads of shots to the head that I was assuming even with lower calibers that their tweaks to blunt damage would do much more damage to them or kill them. But it seemed like it did almost nothing. So I'm hoping that they tweak this more in the future. Oh, as a little side note before I forget, this is sort of a public service announcement. There's a bug right now that's leading to people losing key bars and docs cases and factory keys and all kinds of other shit. I ended up losing my 310 key on the same raid that I picked it up. I think the way that the bug happens is if you're hovering over an item in your protector case, your alpha, your gamma, whatever, and you then move over to another item and you click delete on your keyboard, it'll discard that item, but it'll also discard the other items you hovered over. It's something like that. So just be very careful when you're discarding items that you make sure you're not losing any of your important stuff. That's really a major pain in the ass, and it's more reason why people should insure their key bars and their keys and everything like that, even in their protector cases, because you never know when you're going to accidentally drop these things. I have experienced a few kind of weird server issue, invisible player issue, kind of things like that. Uh, Hopefully that they're going to be tuning and fixing and improving over time. It's just something worth mentioning that there have been a few weird things that I actually didn't see before myself, but I've seen a couple times since this patch has gone live. So a couple of things that I do want to mention, like I said, before I finish this video, to maybe give you guys some tips and some info. If there's something you can't find in the marketplace and you're searching for it, double check your filters. It's subtle and might be why you can't find what you're looking for. It could be that you're applying a filter that is just limiting your search results to nothing. So keep an eye out for that. If you get an error that's something like you send bad item, I found that buying certain things like I think it was BS ammo from Prap War, if you buy it in quantities of 100, you get this error every time. But if you change the quantity to something like 101 or 201, it works. So if you get that error, that's the way around it. Now, I have heard a few rumors that market prices of items affect the cost of insurance and repairs. I can't seem to confirm this. Some folks were saying it was costing them loads of money to repair their 3M armors and stuff, but that really wasn't the case for me, so I'm not really sure on that. I can confirm that repairing things like fort armor is absolutely fucking ridiculous right now. So I hope it doesn't stay like that, or there's some tweaks or changes made to that for sure. Now, I haven't had any experience yet with the MP7 or too many of the Mosin mods, so more's going to come on that in the future, as well as a retest of a few things like iron sights and aiming, and maybe a deeper dive into ergonomics and some more of the scav aim behavior. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope this info was helpful, and I look forward to seeing you all on the Twitch stream soon. It's been such a pleasure interacting with everybody from YouTube. So good luck out there, guys and gals. Have a good time, and I'll see you soon.